Hello, my name is Nathan Peterson and I am a specialist with OCD and anxiety. Today, I wanted to go over what the treatment looks like for tics and Tourette's. So before we get into that, make sure you are subscribed to my channel. I'm posting videos every single week on different mental health issues such as OCD, anxiety, tics and Tourette's, and so many others. And if you haven't watched my video on tics and Tourette's already, make sure you go do that. I created a whole separate video on tics and Tourette's, and today we're going to go through what the treatment looks like. So the treatment is called CBIT, or the Comprehensive Behavioral Intervention for Tics. Wow, that's a mouthful. So typically this treatment can be done in about 8 to 10 sessions, sometimes a little bit longer, sometimes a little bit shorter. But what we really want to do is whatever tic the individual has, so whether they're moving their neck or they're moving their arm or they're grunting, we want them to be really aware of what is happening. Of course, they know what's happening because it's happening to their own body, but we're going to be aware of it in just kind of a different way than they're used to. One of the biggest pieces is for them to be aware of these urges. There's typically an urge that is felt before somebody does the tic. I almost think of this like an itch. If I had an itch on my face right here, and it just felt like I really wanted to scratch it, but I chose not to, that urge actually would get bigger and bigger and bigger, and my brain would be urging me to itch it, and that you're not going to feel relief until you do it. So these are the things that I typically want people to track throughout the week. We can't catch every single tic that happens because sometimes people do this hundreds of times a day. 5 times a day. It varies person to person. But you might just pick a moment when these tics are happening and you pull out your phone, pull out a piece of paper, go talk to your mom, whatever it is, and just start tracking some of these things. And what you would track are these. Sometimes it's important to know just what time it is. It's 7 p.m. or it's 5 p.m. We want to say, okay, well, at this moment, you really like that tic really wants to happen. Try not to do it and see if you can notice an urge. Maybe 0 to 10, 0 being the smallest, 10 being the biggest urge. See what happens. Try as hard as you can to not do it, see what that urge feels like. Some individuals like to see this as a low, medium, or a high, so it doesn't get too complicated. But just pay attention to it. You gotta rate this urge each time the tic happens. We also wanna know how aware are you that this tic is even happening. Sometimes individuals can do a grunting noise, or they can move their neck, or they can crack their knuckles, or do something that they've just been doing for the past 10 minutes or so, and they haven't even noticed. Other people have noticed, but they haven't. And so we want to know, how aware are you that this is even happening? Because if you're not aware, obviously it's going to be really hard to track this stuff. But I typically look at this as a low, medium, or high. I caught myself halfway through and then I realized what I was doing, or someone else pointed this out for me. We also want to look at what activity you're probably doing in that moment. Are you on your way home from school? Are you sitting on the couch? Are you in your room? Are you reading a book? Are you on an iPad? Are you watching TV? Are you playing a video game? Are you playing with friends? We just want to know what is happening because we can often find some common themes of why somebody might do these tics. So we just want to know what you are doing when that tic is happening. What emotions are you feeling? Are you feeling bored? Are you feeling excited? Are you feeling angry? Are you feeling sad? We just want to know what that emotion is. I would tell you one of the biggest emotions that I see with this is bored. When somebody's bored, it tends to happen a little bit more. We also want to start paying attention to thoughts. What thoughts are happening in your brain right now? Are you thinking about that test you have tomorrow? Are you thinking about just, man, this is like 30 minutes to get home from school today. This is a long time. You're thinking about your sister? What is going through your brain right now? You're thinking about that video game you can go play? You're thinking about possibly being judged by others because you are doing this tic? We also want to just look at some sensations that are happening. So do you feel something? So let's say I had a grunting noise that came out, or maybe a cough. Do I feel something in my throat, just like maybe a little tickle or something right before that happens? Or do I feel something in my nose before I start wanting to move it? Or do I feel something with my eyes before I start wanting to blink? We want to see if we can notice maybe some sensations that possibly might happen before these tics even start. I also have people stand in front of a mirror and we practice doing the tic. On purpose. We practice it in slow motion. And what that might look like is if my neck moved like this, we'd say, okay, well, let's do it again. And we'd move the neck like this, and we'd do it again. And we'd start noticing that, hey, do you realize you move your neck like this and then your eyes close? That we want to pay attention to what's happening, and so we can figure it out detail by detail, because it's really important for the next step. And so like I said, it's going to be really hard to take care of every single tic that happens during the day to start tracking all of these things. So you might just pick certain moments that you notice, like, man, it's every time I'm on my way home from school. It's every time I'm on an iPad. It's every time I'm thinking about my friends. Whatever it is, you want to start paying attention to these and start tracking it. So for a lot of individuals, there tends to be more than just one tic that happens. There could be multiple. So we create what's called a tic hierarchy. And this is kind of what it sounds like. We essentially just write down all the tics that are happening. So I have an eye twitch here, my jaw kind of clicks right here, I crack my knuckles, my neck moves. Those are all those few different things. But then we rank them. We say, which one is the most intrusive in your life? So my neck moving is more intrusive than my eye blinking. And my jaw is, not so bad. And so we would just kind of rank that from essentially most intrusive to least intrusive. And unlike OCD, where we start with the easiest and work up, we actually are starting with the most intrusive first. So if the neck one is the one I want to take care of, that's what we're going to start with. One thing we want to pay attention to are, we really just want to find those times where the tic might happen more than another time. So when I'm around a lot of people, maybe this tic happens a little bit more than if I'm just sitting in my room. Or if I'm really excited about something because I'm going on that vacation, spring break is next week. And that's going to be different than a week where I'm just full of school. I don't know how many times I've heard individuals say, like, we went on vacation and it didn't happen at all. Or it barely even happened while we were there. Like, all the stresses are gone. No expectations. For some reason, those tics don't happen. Obviously, each person's different, but I've heard that a lot. So after you start tracking all of these things, we typically want to find some trends. Try to find some themes throughout all of these. So we know that, man, Johnny, do you realize that you tend to do kind of like the eye blinking and the grunting on your way home from school? And that's like a constant thing. So it's every single day. So we are purposely going to create what's called a competing response, something that is going to get in the way of you being able to do this tic, or it's going to make it more inconvenient for you. You think about it, the tic wants to happen and you are creating something to compete with it. And we know that you're vulnerable in the car because that's just the time that it tends to happen. And so we're going to really pay attention to when you are in the car, we're keeping this mindfulness in there, and we're going to say, you're doing this in the car. You're going to also do this in other times where you're noticing this urge, because that's really one of the most important parts of this, is you got to pay attention to that urge, that feeling right before it happens. Right before it happens, we got to do something about it. So a competing response can look like this. Let's say we're working on eye twitching. Eye twitching, somebody might be blinking their eyes a certain amount of times, or they might be looking up, or they might be looking around. That we would say a competing response is when you notice that urge, when you've gotten really good at it, we're going to say, let's just pick one point in the room and you're just going to look at it. And you're going to blink maybe every 5 seconds. And you're going to blink and you're going to blink. And you're just going to keep looking at that one spot. And you're going to keep doing this until that urge is probably down by half. But no matter what, you're holding this for a minute. It's got to be a minute. So if that urge went down in 10 seconds, doesn't matter. We're still going to be blinking for at least a minute. So after that minute, you're going to evaluate to see where you're at. If that urge is still there, you're probably going to keep blinking. And you're going to keep going. And you got to be really mindful of what you're doing. And really what it does is it starts training your brain that it sends all these signals down that said, hey, this is important and you need to do this thing. And you said, cool, well, I could do that, but I'm choosing to do something else. And look, I'm okay at the end of it all. So you sent those signals right back that said, I'm good. Stop telling me I need to do this because look, I didn't do it and I'm just fine. That's one example. I've seen other people who just put their finger on their eyelid and they're just gonna hold that until that urge goes down by half. So you'd say, oh man, it's like an 8 out of 10. I really, really, really want to keep blinking, or I want to look over to the side, but I'm going to hold this until that urge goes down to a 4, because that's about half. Let's say somebody was grunting, or that their throat, they're kind of doing that cough. That sometimes a simple competing response is like, just put your finger on your throat. And it's the same thing. I notice the urge, I'm going to put my finger on my throat. Another thing I've seen individuals do is kind of just put their chin down, or sometimes they put their chin up, or sometimes they put their teeth together. Or sometimes they put their tongue to the roof of their mouth. That each person is different in what they like and what they don't like. I want something to be easy. So let's say you're like, hey, I'm gonna put the tongue to the roof of my mouth every time I feel this urge, and I'm gonna hold it for at least a minute. Like, what if your friends come over to you and try to talk to you? Are you gonna be able to do it? That we wanna make this so it's not like, oh, this is so annoying that I have to keep doing this. I want it to be something that is like, cool, I've got the tools and I know what I'm gonna do. When it comes to body movements, whether it's an arm that's twitching or it's a neck that's moving or it's knuckle cracking, sometimes a really just simple thing to do is just hold that muscle. Whatever it is, make a fist, whatever you need to do. You don't always have to touch that muscle. You don't always have to actually, like, for instance, if I was working on eye blinking, I can make a fist. It has nothing to do with eyes, but really it's choosing to do something else and be really mindful of it. Throughout this treatment, I want to get away from individuals saying, no, 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 don't do the tic. You're going to be so embarrassed. Don't do it, don't do it, don't do it. Because what do you think is going to happen? It's going to happen. The tic is just going to come out. And so instead, we're like, you know what? You're welcome to do the tic, but I'm choosing to do something else. This treatment, CBIT, is not a stop it therapy. It is a let's do something else therapy. So what if you have multiple tics happening at the same time? I've seen individuals do competing responses for this as well, where they might be holding their chin while they're making a fist on the other hand, or they're keeping their hand down, or whatever the tic is that's happening. They're making a grunting noise maybe while their eyes are blinking, and so guess what? They might just putting their finger on their chin, and that's it. They're just being really mindful of like the pressure of their finger on their chin, focusing on one area on the wall, whatever it is. But what I say is like whatever competing response somebody does, it can't be like, okay, cool, I'll put my finger on my chin and I'm going to continue watching TV. Because you're going to forget what you're doing. And so you have to be really in the zone for at least a minute or longer. I want somebody to be able to pick certain times where they're noticing these vulnerabilities. That every time I tend to have a test, I tend to do these tics a little bit more, or I'm in the car, or I'm at dinner, or whatever it might be, that it is my job that I'm picking these times specifically to be really aware of this. I'm at dinner time, I'm paying attention to it. I'm in the car, I'm really paying attention to it. That what I tend to see is these tics tend to reduce. That these urges start slowing down because these people are just not doing it anymore. They're choosing to do something else and their brain is saying like, why are you okay? It's kind of like that itch. Like I mentioned earlier, if I didn't scratch that itch, guess what? It would go away. It would take a little bit longer. It'd feel a little like uncomfortable, but it would go away. So throughout the 8 to 10 sessions, we tend to just vary the competing responses. We figure out what's working, what's not working. We pick certain times that would be the best for you. We practice them in the office. We do them in slow motion so we know what's happening, and we just repeat again and again and again and again. And here's an important part. Are you willing to do the competing response even though nobody's watching? Because like I'm in front of my mom, of course I'm gonna do it. But if I'm in my room, who cares? I say, let's do this everywhere. Do it everywhere you're at. We can't pick and choose when we're gonna do these competing responses and when we're not. So as I mentioned, we created this hierarchy for tics. We're working on the most intrusive to the least intrusive. And sometimes we just go from one to another, to another, to another, to another. And I find that when we start working on one big one, another one's like, oh boy, you're not doing the eye blinking as much. Maybe I can get you to start like moving your arm. And that kind of becomes the new thing sometimes. And so we're just totally ready for it and like, nope, competing response, there you go. Sorry, brother, not doing it. When it comes to kids or actually even adults, sometimes they say like, give yourself a reward for doing these things because it's not the funnest thing to sit here for like a minute, realistically. Give yourself some type of goal because it's like, okay, well, if I'm willing to do these competing responses 5 times a day, that's good. We're not giving rewards based on how many tics are happening or not. We're giving rewards based off of the treatment. That's the most important part. So if somebody comes back and they're like, I did tics like all day long. I'm like, cool, well, how many times did you do the treatment? And they said, well, I actually did it like 15 or so times a day. And that is what I'm congratulating the person for. Good job for doing the treatment. The tics right now, no big deal. We're gonna figure it out. Getting with a therapist is super important for this. Somebody who can direct you in figuring out those competing responses that are gonna be great. Some individuals may ask, As medication is something that can help with tics. And as I'm not a doctor, I can't prescribe anything, I can't recommend anything. I know individuals sometimes will take what's called NAC or NAC for tics. Some people say it works, some people don't. But regardless, it's something to maybe ask your prescriber to see if they've heard of it, see what they think, see what's going to be the best for you, because sometimes there's anxiety that comes along with tics. And when there's anxiety, there's a whole separate treatment we could be doing for this, that sometimes if we just even reduce the anxiety, the tics will reduce by themselves as well. Now you have a general idea of what the treatment is for tics and Tourette's. I hope this video was helpful for you. If it was, make sure you let me know down in the comments. Do you have ideas of competing responses people can do? What's worked for you? What hasn't worked for you? Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.